Okay, so in the last class we actually stopped at and we discussed about the how we can identify that particular protein folds, the type of folds that are present in a particular amide that in a protein. For example, the helix, the loops, and the beta sheet regions in a particular protein, right? But that was not accurate because it actually predicted which amino acid participated in that particular helix and what is the probability that particular amino acid will form the helix. So it didn't give us an information that whether that particular protein that we had, whether it could achieve a helix nature, or whether that particular fold can fold into a beta sheet region, or is it simply a loop based method, right? So that's why we that particular information, that particular the server could only show us and give us the information that what each amino acid can do, but it that might not be the exact nature of that particular protein, right? Because sometimes whether there are some amino acids which are not prone to fold, which are not prone in folding to suppose it does not want to fold into, it doesn't want to have the alpha helix nature, it doesn't want to have the beta sheet region, but due to the presence of all the surrounding amino acid, that particular amino acid, even if it's a beta sheet forming, even though if it has a beta sheet forming nature, it will obviously fold to alpha helix if the surrounding amino acid they all fold into that alpha helix domain, right? So that's why today we're going to discuss about another server that could actually predict the not only the structure of a particular protein but also its localization and that mutation, the effect of a mutation that will happen on that particular protein. Okay, so before we move on to that, obviously we're going to first discuss about UniProt server. Okay, because we know that whenever a particular protein is discovered, a number of things is assigned to it, whether that particular the most basic thing is the sequence, and then you have to assign whether that particular protein where is it localized, and does it have any isoform, and if it has any isoform, how much the isoform is different from the original protein. So we have all those information stored in a particular database, and those informations are really necessary for us. And why? Because if we don't have those information, it becomes really difficult for us to standardize a protein, because if you need to work with protein, you need to have all those background information, right? Because suppose a particular protein, a group of people are working with a single protein. Okay, now you are also working with a particular protein. You are working in India, whereas there are some other people who are working with the same protein in other parts of the country. Not in only country but globally, they might be present anywhere. Now suppose they have made a significant contribution, but not always you get to know that what that contribution is. So that's why they always upload that particular contribution into the website or to the database, so that whenever you access that database, you can see that information, and that makes your job much easier, so that you can continue from that onward. Because it's not possible for us to always gather information about the whole protein and start from the very beginning, because if we do that, we are not going to finish anything, right? We always have to start with the from the beginning, and that's why there are some database, and the one database that we are really important about is the UniProt database. So we will talk about UniProt database today. So this is the UniProt database. So whenever, if you simply type in UniProt, this particular slide is you have to open up this particular server. For example, let me show you. So this is the UniProt database. Okay, if you just need to type in uniprot.org and it's going to come to it, and then you have to select the UniProt KB from the drop down list, and then simply type in the name of the protein that you want to search for. For example, I have already searched for the nucleolin protein, or you can simply type in nucleolin, suppose. Okay, so, or you can simply type in VGF. I think you all know what VGF is, right? So if you type in VGF, see there are a number of things comes. VGF a human, the VGF a mouse, rat, I don't know what this is, Cotonyx japonica, and then you have VGF a mouse, then you have the Canis lupus, that's the dogs. So you know what, so obviously we're going to we focused with the VGF human, but there are many people who works with different organisms. So this means that all this protein, the VGF protein is constant, but it comes from the human source, and this VGF comes from the mouse source, whereas this comes from the rat source, and such and such. So you have to simply select the ID. For example, if you simply need to click in this particular entry here, and if you simply click it, it's going to open up the VGF protein and everything about it. The first thing that obviously it's going to show you that the name of the protein, that is vascular endothelial growth factor A, and I think you all know what the VGF-A protein is, right, and why it is important, because VGF is really important for in angiogenesis. It plays a really great important role in angiogenesis. Not only angiogenesis, that's one of the key factor of angiogenesis, but it also plays role in the apoptosis and many other cellular function. Then you get the name of the gene and the organism from where it is derived, and then the basic function of this particular protein. For example, see, it's a growth factor active in angiogenesis, vasculogenesis, and endothelial cell growth, and man, there are many other things that this particular protein helps to. You can see all the function here is written here. And the next thing that it comes is the molecular function. So under molecular function, you have the GO. GO is a gene ontology, right? So it tells you the molecular function of this particular protein. Now, one of the factor of function of this particular protein is that it's a growth. It has a growth factor nature, right? So you can see that yes, it has a growth factor activity, and not only that, it has a heparin binding activity, the identical protein binding activity, the platelet derived growth factor receptor binding. All these are the function of this particular molecule. But what about the biological role? If you scroll down, you're going to see the biological role or the biological importance of this particular molecule, the process in which this particular molecule plays a role. For example, it has an important role in the activation of protein kinase activity, and I've already talked about the angiogenesis, right? So what is angiogenesis? Angiogenesis is formation of new blood vessels. That means in our body, obviously, suppose you have a cell in a particular part, you have a cell, new cell. Now obviously that particular cell is going to derive nutrition from the blood, but the blood, how will the blood supply the nutrition there? It will form tiny blood vessels that will cater to the need of that particular cell, right? And this formation of blood vessel is known as angiogenesis. And in case of cancer, there are many tumors, right? And whenever there are tumor, those tumors need high amount of nutrition, because we know that the tumor has a high growth. The nature of the growth of those tumors are very high. So that's why they need a huge amount of nutrition, and that's why they need a huge amount of blood supply. And that's why angiogenesis in and around those tumors are very high, and that's why angiogenesis is very important procedure in case of tumor. And when sometimes, and if you can simply stop that angiogenesis, that particular tumor is going to starve, and slowly it is going to die. So obviously there are various drugs. People have already found drugs that can actually target this particular VEGF protein, so that they can stop this angiogenesis pathway. But as I will tell you later on also, the main nature of this proteomics is that it's not always that a single protein is responsible for the function of a whole for your body. For a particular function, there are multiple proteins are involved in. For example, in angiogenesis, you have the role of this VEGF protein. You have the supporting role of the MYC protein. You have the supporting role of the MAP kinase pathway. So a number of just a minute. Yes. So there are a number of factors that actually play a role in this particular angiogenesis, and that's why you, in everywhere, always you have to try and you have to study the whole protein. So it's not always that if you simply try to stop VEGF protein, it's not that the angiogenesis pathway is going to stop, because there are a number of supporting proteins that are present there, and those are also going to, you need to stop them also, right? Because that's the importance of proteomics. You need to see the interaction of different proteins, not a single protein, but the interaction of all the different proteins that are present in your system. Okay, so like this, these are all the biological process that this particular molecule or this particular protein plays in. Okay, so these are the, so you can see how important this particular protein is. It plays a role in all these proteins. The next you come is the enzyme and pathway database, and where you can see that it has a in which pathway this particular protein plays a role into and all this. Then you have the taxonomy part. In the taxonomy part, you can actually see the taxonomic lineage where this particular, how this particular protein has evolved in, and from where this particular protein has started to evolve, and what's the current path now. And next you can see the subcellular localization. Obviously, since this you can see that this particular protein is a growth factor, right? So the VEGF is a growth factor, and obviously since it's a growth factor, it's going to oh, Shruti, sorry. You can hear me now, right? Okay, sorry. Okay. The other person who was there, he didn't inform me. So, okay. So actually, I'm discussing about this particular UniProt database. Okay, in short, let me tell you, this UniProt database. You can simply type in the UniProt, and it's good. This is a protein database. Okay, in this particular database, you can have every information about a particular protein, be it all the information starting from the sequence to its cellular localization, to find out the post-translational modification. Then you can find out the family in which this particular protein belongs to, and all the references also, the name of the pathway in which this particular protein plays a role, and all this different thing. Okay. So I was discussing about this subcellular localization, and since this particular protein is a growth factor, so obviously it's going to be secreted. So see, where it is present is generally present in the extracellular region or secreted, and to support this particular secretion, you have 3 publication, and if you simply click on this publication, you can get the information of this publication. And to know more about this particular thing, you can simply type in the name of the just simply look out for this particular paper, and you can read the whole paper so that you know everything about this particular role. Okay, so that's the thing, the subcellular location you can see. And next you come is the pathology. Okay, and then you have the that means in pathology means that what is the role of this particular protein in disease biology. Okay, so obviously it is highly related to disease biology, because this particular protein is obviously the dysregulation of this particular protein leads to cancerous growth and tumors. So that's why obviously it is related to, but not only that, you can also have other kind of similar, like you can see that it is a consequence of diabetes mellitus, diabetic retinopathy, diabetic nephropathy, and all the other diverse things, and you can simply read about those in this particular thing. And the next important role of this particular database is it also give you the post-translational modification that takes place in this particular protein. For example, see, the signal peptide is since it's a secreted protein, obviously it's going to have a signal peptide, right? Because the signal peptide is the main which actually signals whether this particular protein should be excreted outside, or it should be present in the membrane, or it should be secreted outside. So that's the role of the signal peptide. Now always the signal peptide is going to be present there, and generally the signal peptide simply takes the whole protein out of the cell in the extracellular domain. So that's why that signal peptide actually leads the protein. So that's why you can see that signal peptide is obviously going to be the first, right? It's like the engine of a train. The engine simply drags the whole train. The signal peptide simply acts as the engine. It drags the whole protein along with it. So you can see the position 1 to 26 is present in signal peptide, and the rest of the chain that's present as VEGF protein. That is starting from 227 to 232. But in the amino acid modification part, there are some modifications. For example, you can see that it has a disulfide bond of between the 52nd and 94th cysteine. Okay. Then you have another disulfide bond between 83rd and 128th, and then you have between 87th and 130th. Okay. And apart from that, there are also various other kind of post-transcriptional modifications that are generally present there. For example, say in this particular nucleolin protein, I have already opened it up actually. So in this particular case, you can see that just give me a minute. Okay, just a minute. Hello. हाँ, मुझे आपको दे दीजिएगा, वो उनका रेटिंग है। Yeah, sorry for that. Okay, see, so this is another protein, nucleolin protein. This nucleolin protein is it plays a role in binding to the G protease nature and sometimes act as a transcription factor also. So see, under amino acid modification, you can see the residues where it gets the modification. For example, the residue at the ninth position, it's a lysine, so it gets modified to N6 acetyl lysine. So like this, you can see all the 28 is a serine, so it gets modified to a phosphoserine. So like this, you can see all the modified residues. Now, why it is important? Because sometimes the protein, if there are some major mutations in post-translational modifications, the protein nature changes, right? Because sometimes the protein is highly active. If the particular site is not phosphorylated, or if that particular lysine is not acetylated, then the particular protein sometimes lacks the functionality, and only after that modification the protein gains the functionality. And sometimes certain dysregulation might lead to some modification into some other side chains that are not intended, and those modifications sometimes dysregulates a particular protein and it makes them a mutant protein, and those mutant proteins sometimes it might become oncogenic for that particular reason. Okay, and that's why these modifications are really important. Okay, these are really important. So you might sometimes suppose sometimes what happens is in some kind of disease, you're going to identify the particular protein that is going to have certain modifications, and that those modifications are going to lack in a control cell or in a healthy cell. Okay, so simply by taking a look at those modification, you can understand that these modifications are are actually responsible for that particular disease, and that's why you need to modify those. You need to read about those modifications, and you can carry forward the research from there on. So these are the modifications that you can find in this particular protein. Okay, now in the case of VEGF, the modifications are really limited. There are not many modifications are present, but as you can see in this case of this nucleolin protein, the modifications are measured. Okay, and not only that, you can also see the SUMOylation that occurs in this particular lysine. Okay, so all these things are mentioned here, and simply whether you are, and if you are interested about a particular protein, you can gather all the information that people have already found out of that particular protein. Okay, and now you can simply after that you can simply move down and simply take a look into the other parts. For example, in this case, simply look at this particular protein. If this is not a extruded protein, you can say that this particular protein is usually present inside the nucleus. Okay, so obviously the location is in nucleolus, and sometimes you can also find the particular protein in cytosol also. Okay, in presence of this particular cytosol. So that's why you can always see that the locations of this protein, the localization of this protein also in this particular case. And if you again come down, you are going to find the proteomic database. Now, the proteomic database is really important because, as I've told you, that the proteomics database means whether in this particular case what are the other proteins with which this particular protein is making an interactions. Okay, so these are the information that you can get from the proteomics database, and also you can get to see the post-translational modifications that take place in this particular database and whatnot. So there are the PTM database is the Phosphosite Plus. If you simply click on it, the Phosphosite Plus is one of the database. It's a third-party database, and here you can actually find out the post-translational modifications. Okay, you can simply, if you simply click on it, and then you can simply, this is the whole protein, and if you simply zoom it, simply move your mouse wheel up, and you can simply zoom in, and you can see the nature. For example, if you simply move your mouse to this particular highlighted balls, you can see that this is the lysine 124. Just take a look. You have K124, right? The K124 is the lysine 124, and it happens what is it? It generally undergoes acetylation. Okay, this is the acetylation. Okay, and then you come to the next residue, the serine 145. It undergoes that phosphorylation, and so these are the various kind of things. For example, you can simply take a look into this, the K324. It undergoes ubiquitinylation and also SUMOylation. So this particular residue is really important because if you know that ubiquitination always occurs when a protein needs to get degraded. So this particular protein, this particular residue is really important because it undergoes both ubiquitination and SUMOylation. Not only this one, simply take a look at this residue here, the K133. This also goes under monomethylation, okay, and then it also undergoes ubiquitination. So these are the modifications that takes place. Now you can see in a particular residue, sometimes more than one modifications takes place. But what about the mutated one? In some mutated protein, you have to find out that this, if there are some errors, suppose this particular residue is mutated, the lysine is mutated to arginine. Now, if it is mutated to arginine, this particular post-translational modification is not going to occur, and it might lead to some other kind of things, right? So that's why if you simply look into this particular domain, and these are the domains, the RRM1 is a domain, this is another RRM1 other domain. So these are the mutations that are present in this particular domain and whatnot. And you can also get the information of this particular protein. Here the protein information, the site table, that means it simply tells you the see, this is the site table. You can see, find out the notifications, what happens in this particular thing, and yes, you can find out the expression of the mutation frequency of this particular patient in cancer, what type of cancer. It's not that in always in every type of cancer this particular protein is going to mutated. No, not always, because they are in these mutations are really cancer specific. You can find out that there are some proteins which are highly mutated in breast cancer cell line, but if you check into the colon cancer or into the liver cancer, you are going to find that that particular protein has no effect into the colon cancer or into the pancreatic cancer. For example, see in this endometrial cancer, this particular protein mutation is really high, rate is really high, whereas in stomach cancer is very high, in colorectal cancer is high, whereas in prostate cancer, in kidney, or in ovarian cancer, in thyroid cancer, the rate, the percentage of the protein mutation is really low. Simply you can also gather this information from here. So these are the third-party site, and if you simply click on this database, they are going to open up the third-party database where you can find out more about this particular protein. So this particular Phosphosite Plus is only responsible, and it only highlights the post-translational modifications, okay, and not everything. So whereas in this Uniprot, you're going to have everything here. In Phosphosite Plus, you can only gather the information about the post-translational modification. Now, like this, there are many databases. Okay, you can see the proteomics database, also the proteomics DB database. So let us open it. Well, let it open. So apart from that, you can get the 2D page database. It simply shows you how much. I think I have already opened the 2D page database. Oh, not, I have not opened. So this is another database, IPTM-net. It also shows you the methylation that takes place, the modification that takes place. So these are all the third-party database. The proteomics database is not opening up. Okay, let me tell you the other things. So next you are going to see the expression patterns, okay, where this particular protein is expressed in. So you can see that this particular protein is highly expressed in testis and 123 other tissues. And you can simply click on this particular database. It's going to open a third-party database where you can simply take a look into all the tissues where this particular protein is highly expressed. Then you have this particular interaction database. Okay, now you know that this particular protein, the protein does not work alone, right? The protein always makes certain interactions. For example, for any function, the protein has to make interaction. If the protein does not interact with other protein, it fails to show its functionality, right? So in this case, you're going to have this particular interaction. You can see that this particular protein interacts with this APTX, CIQPP, ERBP4, and these are the PubMed ID. You can simply click on this PubMed ID to load this in this particular CRBB, and this is the paper where you can simply read this paper and see the interaction type that it has with this particular protein. Okay, so these are the interaction that it has. So obviously, if this particular protein is mutated, or this particular protein is suppose not expressed, now obviously this it's also going to affect the interaction with these proteins. And in that one, suppose the interaction, that the function of this protein by interacting with this, suppose it is interacting with the APTX. So it obviously has certain implications that while interacting with the APTX. Now, if that particular protein's nucleon is modified, or if it is mutated, then this interaction is not going to be fruitful, and that unfruitful interaction might lead to some other kind of complication, or it might not. So that's the nature of the so that's what people try to discover, that what happens and what not. Okay, so these are the type of things that you can also gather from this particular website. And finally, you have the structure. Now this is the particular nucleolide protein. solved structure. Now people have not, these are only NMR structures. Okay, see the three structures that we have solved, these three are all the NMR structures. So people have failed to crystallize this protein and find out the crystallographic structure. So that's why you only have the NMR structure. And this is the PDB ID, and you can take a look into this PDB ID. If you are a structural biologist, then obviously you are more interested about this particular protein. Okay, the structure of a particular protein. So that's why you have to know this particular protein and all. And this is the secondary structure of this whole protein. So as you can see, the mark says this is the area where the structure has solved, and these are the PDB structure unknown known for these areas. Okay, whereas see these blue highlights for the helix, this pink highlights for the turns, and whereas these greens are the beta sheets. So you can simply take a look into you can gather information about the structure of this particular protein also. And next, if you simply come down, it undergoes the family, where this particular protein belongs to, what family this particular protein belongs to, and all those other things. And next, the one most important thing that we need is the sequence of the protein. This is the sequence of the whole protein. Okay, these are generally given in 1-letter code, and sometimes you need to download this protein in a FASTA format. So if you need to form FASTA format, simply click on the FASTA format and then you can simply copy it. Now the FASTA format is really different. It's a one type of format of the particular protein, and this is how you can highlight it. It starts with a greater than sign, and then you have you have to write the name of the protein or the other thing of that related to the particular protein. And from the next line, you are going to have the sequence of the protein in one letter amino acid code. So this is the FASTA format. So sometimes we need to upload this FASTA format. Suppose if you need to work out about the protein interaction, or try to find out the structure of a protein, or anything, you have to have the protein sequence, right? So that's why you can gather the protein function, structure, and sequence from here. And apart from that, it also shows you all the information that you have about this particular protein. Okay, and so these are the isoform of this particular protein, and these are computationally mapped. So these are not experimentally derived. These are the other isoform of proteins, and you can simply now there are several proteins that have several other kind of isoforms, and those isoforms are known. For example, you have a natural variant. In natural variant, this isoform is different. How it is different? In the 60th position, the proline is replaced by a leucine. In the 122nd amino acid, the proline is again replaced by a leucine, and the 174th, this particular variant, the alanine is replaced by a valine. So these are the kind of mutations that has taken place. So this is the isoform of these three are the isoform of that are generally found about this particular protein. Okay, and not only that, you can simply, this particular website and database has more information that you can gather. You can simply click in anything to get to see the information in the other side. Okay, so if you simply just in your free time, simply go into this particular website, type in the name of the protein, and simply type in anything. For example, if you need to find out the phylogenomic database, then simply click on this. Okay, it's going to open up another database set, and you can search all those things from here. And obviously it also depends upon the nature of what you are doing. If you're only working with the particular protein, the structure, then obviously these things, the phylogenomic database doesn't, you are not interested in these particular databases. But again, you might need those because we don't know the nature of your research work. Okay, so that's why you can find many information from this particular website. So it all actually depends upon you to simply the type of work you do and the thing you can do. The major thing is that all the important things are highlighted. So you can simply scroll down, look at a particular thing, and hover around and spend information. Okay, so any question till this part? Okay, so fine. So now these, as you can see, the structures and everything about the particular protein is in this particular cases are known, but sometimes there are subproteins for which you know nothing. The structures are not known. Okay, obviously you know the sequence. You have to know the sequence because you can't proceed from there on. But apart from this, if you know the sequence, the other things are not known. You don't know whether the particular protein, how it looks like, whether the particular protein is alpha helix in nature or beta sheet in nature, why is it localized. So there are some database that actually help you to predict those things. Okay, so today we're going to look at another one such database. So predict protein is one such database, not database, it's a server that actually let me send you the. Okay, so this is one type of let me find out the. So predict protein is actually a database, or not a database, it's a server, server that actually can help you to predict the structure and nature and everything about a particular protein. Okay, so first thing is that you have to upload the protein sequence in one letter code. Now of course this is a known protein, but let me make this protein unknown. Okay, so suppose obviously it's going to take some time, but it's going to take some time, so rather than making it, so you guess the sequence, you have to only upload the protein sequence in one letter code and then simply click and predict protein, and it's going to predict the thing. Okay, so let me click on example input 1 and predict it, because it's going to take some time. Okay, so I'm not going to waste that time. So this is one of the example that is already given here. So okay, so the first thing first, so this is the particular protein, the SMAD7 protein, which belongs to the human. Okay, so what now sometimes there are some proteins that you suppose you are doing MALDI. So in MALDI you can gather, you sometimes find out if you are doing proteomics, obviously you're going to have some proteins which are not classified earlier. So it is you who is first time identifying or classifying that particular protein. So you know nothing of that particular protein apart from it. Obviously if you can perform LCMS, you gather the sequence of that particular protein. But apart from that particular protein, sequence of the protein, you know nothing. Don't know whether the particular protein is involved in which functions. You don't know if that particular protein is an extracellular protein or intracellular protein. You don't know the nature of that particular protein also. Okay, if it's a membrane protein or what that particular protein does. So this predict protein server is a server that actually can predict the way, the structure and everything about a particular protein which was not known. For example, see, the first thing it does is the secondary structure prediction. Okay, obviously the first thing it does is it predicts whether this region is the nature, the structure of the protein. So it says that this particular nature is the alpha helix one. So see, this particular nature is alpha helix. Okay, whereas this region is the, you can see these are the beta strand region. This particular strand, from 126th amino acid to 129th, that is the belongs to beta sheet region, and this area belongs to beta sheet region. You can see the amino acid number. Okay, and where this is the other thing, that means it can be a loop, it can be a erroneous structure, it can have any kind of structures. Okay, and these are the beta sheet structure, and you can simply point zoom in and zoom out to find out about a particular area. Okay, so this is the secondary structure prediction. Next you have the solvent accessibility. Now what is solvent accessibility? Solvent accessibility means whether that particular protein, protein you have, whether this particular protein just give me a minute. Okay, okay, so we have the in solvent accessibility you get to know about the surface of the protein. Now obviously when the protein folds, there are going to be some areas that are going to be buried inside, and the areas or the amino acids that are deeply buried inside, those are the solvent inaccessible area, because those are not exposed on the outside. And since those proteins are not exposed outside, what happens? Those particular area can't be the active site, or those areas can't be the protein interaction site. Only the exposed areas can form, that are present, that are interacting with the water, that can form the active site. Only those exposed areas can form the protein interaction site. Understood? Okay, so that's why it says that these areas, you can simply click on that to get the idea about the amino acid number. So these are actually areas that are exposed outside, whereas these areas, the orange color highlighted one, these are buried inside. So that means these are the amino acid that you can't. So suppose if you are working as a drug discovery, okay, you are working as a drug designer. Now obviously you get to know about this particular protein for which this target is a very absolutely new target. You know nothing of this particular protein, but you have to start somewhere, right? So if you simply predict the solvent accessibility about this particular protein and you get the idea that these amino acids are exposed outside, then obviously you can generate a particular drug that can bind to these targets or these amino acids. You are not going to use the amino acid that are present between 98 to 100 or the amino acid between 157 to 168 to bind to your drug, because the drug, that particular area is not exposed, that is deeply buried inside. The drug can't access that particular area. So obviously to discover a particular ligand, obviously you need to find the exposed areas. Okay, so you only need to focus on these particular areas. Again, another importance is that sometimes some areas, some proteins are membrane protein, right? Now the membrane protein part, the proteins which are membrane protein, obviously in that case the hydrophobic amino acids are going to be present exposed outside. Generally what happens if it's a cytosolic protein, the hydrophobic amino acids are generally buried inside because they repel water, right? They repel water, so that's why they are deeply buried inside. But sometimes for the membrane protein, the hydrophobic areas are exposed outside, especially for the area in which which is deeply embedded inside the membrane. Okay, so that is actually exposed, that is actually present in that particular membrane, and you have to leave. If it's a membrane protein, you get the idea that which part is. So in case of membrane protein, the buried ones will be the hydrophilic part. In case of cytosolic protein, the buried will be generally the hydrophobic part. So you also get to know the type of amino acid, the nature of amino acid that are present in these particular cases. Okay, so it helps you. Next you have the topology of this particular protein. In this particular case you have nothing. So next you get to see the disordered regions, and these are the disordered regions. Okay, now you have the B value. Do you know, do you have any idea about the B value? And sometimes you are also sometimes going to find that this particular area is a reprof, what reprof, TM seg, meta disorder, prof, F val, B val. What are these? These are actually the algorithm by which the server predicts these nature. For example, the secondary structure predictor and solvent accessibility. The reprof is the algorithm which predicts the solvent accessibility and the secondary structure of this particular protein. Okay, whereas this to find out the protein binding site, the ProNA is the algorithm that predicts the protein interaction sites. Okay, okay, understand. Whereas the ProNA also predicts the DNA binding sites. So these are the algorithm that predicts the nature of this particular protein. Okay. So for the relative B values, what is B value? B value means how much the particular protein, if the B value is low, that means that particular amino acid residue is highly stable. If the B value is high, that means that particular amino acid is really unstable. Really unstable means that particular is present in a loop region. Because if a particular amino acid is present in alpha helix or in a beta sheet, then it is under a structured region, and that is not going to flicker around, right? It is going to maintain a particular peculiar structure because it is under some constraint. Whereas in the loop region, they have no structure at all, right? The terminal area, they have no structure at all, and the amino acid at those areas, they will flicker a lot, and they are going to have a high B value. So by predicting the B value, you can also gather the idea that whether this particular amino acid are present within a structured region or they are present in a disordered region. Okay, as you can see that this area, so see that if the when the B value is low, it is not under the disordered region, whereas this disordered region matches with the high B value and the intermediate B value. Sorry, the intermediate B value and the high B value. See everywhere. So this is the disordered region and this matches with the intermediate and the high B value. But see the low B value region, this will not match with the disordered region, because any amino acid which is in the ordered region, they are going to have a very low B value. The B factor is going to be very low. Okay, and B factor is really important in case of X-ray crystallography, and you also require this B factor while simulating to know that whether the particular protein or that amino acid is going to flicker a lot, or it's going to roam here and there, or not, or it's going to have a particular peculiar structure. Okay, so next we have the protein binding region, that these regions are protein binding, or whether they are binding to a protein or if they are binding to a DNA. And if they are binding to DNA, what is the so this 58 to 72 amino acid is going to bind to the DNA. So that means obviously if the protein is not a DNA binding protein, is not going to have a DNA binding protein. Only the transcription factors and the other protein, the protein which helps in the recombination or in the overall maintaining the genome stability, to proteins which maintains the gene stability, or the proteins which regulates the epigenetics of your system, they are going to have the DNA binding regions. Okay, apart from it, only the proteins which are the membrane proteins or the proteins which are exposed outside, the growth factors, the hormones, they are generally not going to have the DNA binding regions. Okay, understand? Okay, so this is in general the whole thing that you get to know. So next you can also see the secondary. To know more about this particular color, you can select the structure annotation, the secondary structure and solvent accessibility, and here they are going to give you the detail about this particular thing, the secondary structure predictor, as I have already discussed this, right? And next we have the solvent accessibility again, which part is exposed outside, inside and all. And overall you have this pie chart which tells you the secondary structure composition of this whole protein and the solvent accessible regions of this whole protein. And if you simply scroll down, you're going to see that how do we predict the secondary structure. You're going to, they have listed the algorithm by which they predict this secondary structure, and you simply can also read the references. You can simply click on these references to know more about this particular algorithm. Okay, and the algorithms are also mentioned here, that how do they calculate, and for every section you can get these ideas. Obviously you can get, and you can see the transmembrane helices, and of course the transmembrane helices are not going to be there because this is not a membrane protein. Okay, only the membrane protein are going to have transmembrane helices, right? And if it's not a membrane protein, you are not going to have any transmembrane helix. And obviously this has a protein this has a DNA binding domain. That means it's obviously it is present in the nucleus. Okay, it might act as a DNA binder. So obviously it's not a membrane protein then. Next we have the protein disorder and flexibility thing. Again, the main thing that we have discussed, the B value, but in detail you can see in this particular section here. Okay, but the main thing that why this particular is important is that the effect of point mutation. It's going to show you under the functional annotation, it's going to show you the heat map of this particular protein. Now what is a heat map? The heat map tells you the role of a mutation in this particular protein. Now the red means if you have a dark red, that means a particular substitution will have a strong effect. A dark red means a substitution is having a strong effect, whereas white space indicates a very minimum effect. Okay, that means it's a similar kind of mutation and nothing much is happening. Whereas the blue symbol means either no effect or it's a neutral effect. Okay, whereas the black mark are the Y type residues interactions. For example, see, so this is the structure of the whole protein, MFR, TKR, SAL, VER. So if I replace M with A, what is going to happen? You have a red, but this red is if you simply hover your pointer to this red, is going to have a score of 41. Score of 41 means it is going to have some effect, but not that, because this red is not that deep. But how if I mutate this particular M with arginine, what will happen? The red is high, 78. That means it is going to have a pronounced effect. A mutation of methionine with the arginine is going to have a pronounced effect. Whereas a mutation of this methionine with, suppose I don't have anything else here, but let's talk about this arginine. A mutation of this arginine with alanine is not going to have any effect. That's why it has a score of, it's a white score, so it's not going to have a major effect. Okay, but see, a mutation of this arginine with lysine is going to have approximately neutral effect or no effect. That's why you get a blue signal. And like this whole everything is color coded. But why is this color coded? Because see, had they given a number, for example, had they given a methionine to argine, score is 78. So suppose you have 78 here, you have 41 here, you have 55 here. It becomes really difficult to see overall mutation. If all there are numbers, it becomes really difficult to track the numbers, right? But if they are color coded, it becomes much easier for you to grasp the idea that yes, a mutation of this glycine with these residues are not going to have any important effect. So I'm not going to even check the numbers. I'm not going to even check the numbers. See, the number is minus 74, minus 83, minus 71. But I know that they are not going to have any effect. So I'm not going to check all the numbers here one by one. Just a single glance will tell me whether this mutation is going to have any effect or not. Okay, that's why this heat map is really important. And this is the importance of this particular server. It actually tells you the nature of a mutation in this particular protein. So suppose if you have a protein and to study the mutation, type of mutation, if you simply upload the protein and you can see the type of mutation that it can happen, it's going to give you the kind of mutations, the effect of a mutation that might happen on the particular protein. Okay, and these are the functional effects. And to know more about this particular, how do they do, simply read about this particular algorithm. The SNAP2 is the algorithm by which they actually predict this particular mutations and all. Okay. Now after that point mutation, you have the gene ontology term, that means the biological process and what's the role of this particular protein. So this has a role of positive regulation of transcription by RNA-pol2, and then it has a negative regulation of T cell cytokine production. And what's the reliability score? The reliability score is 100. That means they are 100% sure that this is the exact role of this particular protein. But how do they become 100% sure? Because by studying the protein motifs. Now any motif, RNA-pol2 binding will obviously have certain overlapping sequences. A sequence where the RNA-pol2 is going to bind is going to be common in every protein or every DNA. Okay, so by simply taking a look at those motifs, they are sure that this particular, if this particular motif is there, that means this is the role of this particular motif. Okay, by like that they actually predict the score of this particular thing. And next you have the cellular ontology component, where this particular protein is localized to. Acha, these are the newer thing that I can see. So they say this particular protein is localized to where this particular protein is usually present in a cytoplasm or in nucleus or in nucleoplasm. Obviously, if it's going to bind to RNA-pol2 and all, then obviously it's going to present in the nucleus, right? And this is the next. You have the molecular function of this particular protein. This particular protein acts as a ubiquitin protein ligase, collagen binding, molecular transducer activity. These are the activity of this particular protein, as you can see. So you can also predict the structure or the function of this particular protein, and this gives an excellent start site. So if it's a new protein that you have, a novel protein for which it is uncharacterized, because in proteomics obviously we come across some proteins because we are pulling a bundle of proteins. When we are pulling down, we have all the proteins of a cell. Now it's really impossible for everyone to study all the proteins in a cell, right? So sometimes we are going to come across some proteins which were not previously characterized. So this gives you an excellent start site to look into the function of that particular protein, and the experiments that you can also design experiment based on this particular information. Okay. So this is the subcellular localization. It says that it is localized inside the nucleus, right? So that's why the nucleus is green. And next we have the binding sites, that the protein binding site, the DNA binding site, and all that. Okay. So, and next you have the literature search for this. These are the various kind of things that you can understand that this particular server and why these are there and all. Okay. And see, this is a SMAD protein. Paper related to SMADs are present here. So that's why. So that's why this predict protein is actually a very better site rather than that Fastman-Chow to get an idea about a particular protein that you have. Okay. So if you know nothing, then this gives you an excellent start site to take a look into these various proteins and all. Understand, Shruti? Any question till this part? Okay, but obviously to what this, yeah, sir?
No question, sir.
Okay, sure. But make sure that you work with you read about this particular UniProt, okay, because UniProt obviously the UniProt is not only important about finding out the sequence of a protein but also to know everything about a particular protein. If you are into protein research, obviously you need to have this UniProt very handy. It's going to come very handy to you because it has a number of things. For example, if you can simply click in this farm GKB, so to open up a database and it's going to show you everything about this pharmacology of this particular protein, that whether this particular protein, see the nucleolin protein, okay, so this is not a pharmacologically important protein. You can see clinical attention 0, pathway 0, but had this been a various great protein, you are going to have this pathways related to, okay, so you can simply click on this everything and you can read about this particular protein and all, okay. And so that's about how to find out predict the secondary structure and all about a particular protein. So in the next class we're going to start with the modeling, the homology modeling and ab initio modeling of a particular protein, okay. We're going to see some servers where we can actually predict the structure of a protein, and we're going to visualize the structure in PyMol, and we also learn about the PyMol also, how to operate the PyMol, what are the different things we can do with PyMol and all, okay. So just do one thing for the next class, keep one protein, the sequence of one protein in hand with you, the structure of which is unknown, because we're going to solve and model a particular protein whose structure is unsolved, okay. We're going to take a look into some servers the next class, and we're also going to learn about the homology model, that how do they particularly predict the structure and what are the various steps that we have to go through for predicting that nature, and that's all, okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So that will be all for today, Shruti.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Thank you.